3, 2, 1.
Good morning, members of IQSK. It's really a big privilege and honor for me to be able to speak to you. Unfortunately, I couldn't be with you today. I had actually planned to join you physically, but unfortunately, my chairman of council, governing council of Lukenya University, has lost his mother, and I have to attend the funeral today. And because I really wanted to speak to you, I decided let me do a video at least. Let's take advantage of technology, so at least we can have this conversation, which is an important conversation. And more importantly, because we are professionals, I love to speak to professionals whenever I can. And we are trying to demystify this issue of politicians are over there and professionals are over here, and we are trying to find convergence and try and convince a few of you also that we need good people in Parliament. And I'm hoping that at the end of this conversation, we can have that conversation again on the side for those who may be interested, of course. My name is Sylvia Kasanga. I'm an architect by profession. I'm a member of AAK for the last 20 years. And I am also an arbitrator with the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. And I serve in the branch committee here in Kenya. So I'm passionate about ADR. I'm sure some of you have heard me speaking about it. I have sponsored the ADR bill in Parliament, which is in the process of, it's just going through the motions as we speak. And we see how far it is going to go. And today, because I was asked to speak about the political impact on the construction industry, it's a broad conversation, but I've tried to narrow it down as far as I could. And I've written a paper which I have sent to the Secretariat of IQSK in the hope that it can be circulated, for your reference now and probably even in the future. And it has just 5 parts, which I shall quickly go through, for your benefit, and of course to answer the question that was put to me. And it is with a lot of humility then that I present this paper to you. The political impact on the construction industry, of course, cannot be understated. And even, especially here in the country, through the political cycles, and every time we have an election, our industry is the first one to be most affected. And when we don't recover from, an election of sorts, again, we become most affected in the industry. So like this last election of 2017, it was a double election. I'm sure you can agree with me that things never really quite picked up since 2017. And then come COVID, it put the icing on the cake for many of us in the industry, and especially the consultants. We are still really feeling it in our firms. But let's start by first defining what is politics. Sometimes you speak of it, but we really stop to think what exactly is politics. And I'll be making reference to my paper. Politics is a set of activities that are associated with making decisions in groups and other forms of power relations between individuals, such as distribution of resources or status. So I think when you speak of politics and give it that definition, then you can see it breathes into life the fact that politics does affect everything in our lives. And you see, when we talk of politics being associated with decision making, then that is the place of our political leaders. So the quality of your political leaders actually does determine the quality of your life, because the decisions then they make towards distribution of resources and other things then affects you as directly as you can imagine. So some of the political factors that I have picked out that affect our industry, most of which of course you all know. As our political leaders will debate on many things, there will be laws and regulations. And these, of course, affect us directly. We know what a good law is. We know a law that is bad. We know a regulation that is good. We know a regulation that is bad. And it has a direct impact on how we conduct ourselves in the building industry. I remember actually, was it just the year before COVID, there was a regulation that the NCA, the National Construction Authority, through, I think it was the Ministry of East Africa, when they were trying to do the ease of business, they set out a regulation which they had gazetted without adequate public participation to do with the defects liability period. I don't know if you remember that particular instance. And I know through AK at that time, it was our President Mugure who brought it to my attention. And we quickly went to Parliament to censure the Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure, where NCA is resident, to ask them about this regulation, because we could see the impact it will have on contractual matters. And that is the importance of having people in the right places who then can make such decisions when it comes to laws and regulations. The second thing that I've picked out that impacts heavily on our industry, of course, is the stability of the political environment. When our political leaders begin to fight amongst themselves, it brings about an instability that, of course, then affects our industry, our lives, our everything. So, and creates an uncertainty where investors in the building industry, of course, will begin to shy away. The other thing I've picked out is a government influence. Of course, considering that our political leaders will work within the government itself, then their influence becomes very key to how our industry is affected. And I'll just give an example in my thinking. When you see, for instance, our current government has really surpassed the debt ceiling when it comes to the fiscal governance. And this, even as they try to figure out how they're going to do their pending bills, lots of pending bills, unpaid bills to a lot of our local contractors and things like that. And of course, trying to find the money to pay back the loans that then they have borrowed. You find they'll make a decision, for instance, let them float a bond. I think you've seen that in the newspapers. They'll float a bond where the government, the executive is borrowing money from citizens. And what impact does it have? More often than not, you will find that banks will prefer then to, loan their money to the government because of the stability that it presents. And therefore, you start seeing money not circulating adequately in the market, and that will come with an impact to our industry, in the sense that fewer developers will get money and funding for their projects, and fewer Kenyans will be able to get mortgages to buy the homes, and automatically that comes directly to affect us, our industry instantly. A slowdown on the construction industry, meaning the consultants ourselves, we get affected in that sense when suddenly the work dries up. I have another one here that talks about when it comes to politics, at the point when we have, the governance changing from one to another. I'm just talking about election period, like what we are going to experience next year, which already we are beginning to feel the impact this year. When politicking starts, because they're looking for votes, we all know what happens during that time. First, there's the political noise that happens, and of course that slows down the industry, like we had said before, because a lot of investors will shy away in case they can see that the election period may not be good. And our country is very notorious for having very unstable political cycles where you find pockets of Kenyans where there's violence. And this really, of course, does affect our industry. Then, of course, there's the issue of money. There's something we saw in 2013. For the first time in our country, we saw an election that a lot of money was poured into the market. And you see, it has even created a culture that has continued to this time. And in fact, we were expecting that IEBC this time round is going to sort of put a cap to the amount of money that politicians can spend during the electoral cycle, and also bring some, transparency to how they have raised that money as political parties, and then how they spend it. And it's unfortunate that that may not come to pass in this electoral season, and it's most unfortunate. There's an impact when so much money is poured into the economy, and we all know what happens. And you can expect some forms of inflation. You can expect some unrealistic market forces happening. Suddenly, you may find a lot of people can buy homes all of a sudden, or you can find rentals going up all of a sudden, or going down all of a sudden. So all those come with a great impact. I have also picked out another interesting one that is not necessarily unique to us, but it happens a lot in this country. I've called it the tenderpreneur culture, because this seems to come a lot with our political class. And it's the most terrible thing, because in my view, it has metamorphosed and become part and parcel of our culture, and not just within the political and ruling class, but it has really trickled down to Kenyans as a whole. And what happens is during the electoral cycle, you'll find people who will fund political parties. They will raise money for them to use for campaigns. And once they get into power, there's that expectation that then they will benefit from the ruling party by getting all sorts of tenders. And how does this affect our industry? We can't compete on a level playing field. And you know, this is a big problem. How many of you have tried to tender for government jobs and you can't get them? Yet there are some who get them all the time. And then you wonder, why can't this space be expanded? You know, you find others who are taking over jobs that could have actually been industry jobs, and they're being done by people who are not necessarily industry experts. And you know, that raises a lot of issues in the country. And so we have to have these conversations and speak about them and say we need to change some of these cultures. And I want to just quickly go into some of the governance structures. It's good, let's talk, when we talk of the political, let's understand the governance structures that then we have, where we put our leaders. And we have the executive, especially. This is a political class who run the executive. That is the president, and then his team who is in the cabinet. And these are the people who will determine how the money that we raise as people through tax, how that money is going to be redistributed back. And you know, this has a direct impact on our industry. When the government decides it's going to put a priority on large infrastructure projects, ideally we should all benefit as an industry, or it should spur growth to our industry by opening up of the roads and things like those. And it's critical that we understand that this arm of government is very critical, and through their respective ministries, a lot can be done for the industry. You know, you can petition the ministry to change laws, or to change, you know, certain regulations, or to change certain policies. For instance, we are waiting for the building code, you know, the building code, which is actually an initiative of the Ministry of Transport, you know, things like that. The impact of bodies like NCA or the NEMA environment bodies, all these are really resident in the executive. And these are the tools that the executive will use, of course, you know, to put a tab, to put control and put order in our industry. So you can see now how you can interface, you know, with that. We have the judiciary, for instance. You all know judiciary, court orders. You can get court orders, injunctions, and things like that, or judicial reviews where we need something to be interpreted. Then we have the legislature, where I sit, for instance. Very critical, because these are the people who represent the citizens, and it is critical that we understand how we can interface with this as industry. How do we interface with the legislature? How do you make use of the legislature? The way you can use the judiciary, you can use, of course, the executive. There are very many ways. First, we have to understand that the legislature, which represents the electorate, they make and amend laws, they authorize government spending, they scrutinize activities of the government and the ministries and departments and agencies, and it is a forum for debate of national issues. And therefore, it becomes a nice place where you can bring up your issues when you have them in the industry. And I realize that a lot of us, especially professionals, we miss out on the potential of, the potential that the legislature has in influencing how we want our industry to go. So one way is through statements where you go through your member of parliament to raise a question on the floor of the house. The question is directed to a specific ministry, where then the cabinet secretary in that ministry then is censured, and he has to appear before the committee to answer to those questions with a view to rectify whatever issue is ailing that industry. And that's what we did when the defects liability regulations were gazetted, and it was brought to my attention by the then president of the Architectural Association of Kenya. Actually went and put a statement on the floor, and the minister came. Of course, I had to explain a lot because some of these things are technical. That's why you need technical people in parliament. I had to explain to the committee the impact that those regulations would have in the built industry. I had to really break it down for the committee members to understand that it is of great concern to us as Kenyans generally. And we were able to get the minister to come, and we had the online meetings. I think by then COVID had come. We had the online meeting, and it was a big meeting, and we were able to really give a pushback on those regulations, and they were pulled out. And the second way, of course, is through motions. Motions, it's a formal proposal by a member of parliament on a certain action that you want taken in the industry. I have raised one motion that was targeting NCA, and it was to do with the local contractors. We were really worried that our local contractors are losing jobs to the big international contractors. When they come and they do their big infrastructure projects, which are government to government related, some of them remain behind after those contracts are done, and they form local companies and they are taking up work. You'd find, a Chinese contractor doing classrooms in Bungoma, something that our local contractors should be able to do. And because you can't compete quite on a level playing field, we felt in parliament that that is an issue that needed to be addressed. So we raised a motion. We had this conversation in parliament, and we said, let NCA come and answer this question of how they're going to protect our local content when it comes to the construction industry. So this is very critical. And then, of course, bills. Bills can also be raised through parliament, not just through the executive. A private member can actually sponsor a bill, working very closely with the industry. I have not seen one, I think, in our construction industry yet. But AK, we were actually working on a built environment professionals bill, which I'm sure you have probably participated in the making of. But it is yet to be introduced in parliament, and I was really waiting for it, and I think the consultations are still going back and forth. But we had drafted something, we had drafted something actually for members to consider and to give input, and then you can see how that impacts with the industry. So you can see that it's very important to understand your political environment and the impact of it. Now, I just want to reiterate as I finish my paper, because I'm at the tail end of it, that although I have touched on it, I do have a section here written strategies the industry can use to censure government. We really have to participate in our duty as industry. We have to participate through our associations, because that's how we organize ourselves. And we have to realize that through our associations like yourselves, IQSK, there's a lot you can do to censure government, to make sure that we protect the industry, we protect ourselves, in the process we create jobs, and then we have the economy to be thriving, and also to raise the bar and raise the standards in everything that we do. Of course, there are the motions that I have talked about and the statements. Those are fantastic ways of putting government in check and ensuring that your interests within the government and the governing structures of our country are taken care of. Of course, secondly, we have the court processes. Like we said, you can utilize the courts to get what you want, either through, just going straight and filing a petition in court, or you can just go and get court interventions through interpretation of the law when it is an issue that has to do with that. The third way is that you can actually petition Parliament, and this is something I think a lot of Kenyans don't realize, that under the new constitution, Article 37 and Article 119 gives a broad framework for any citizen. It actually gives a right to any citizen to petition any public authority, and in particular, you can send your petition to Parliament to consider, and it is within your authority. You can actually petition on anything. We have received petitions in Senate to do with almost everything and anything. And that petition will have to be considered. In fact, petitions are read in the order paper. They are like the third item on the order paper. That's how high up a priority they are. And a lot of Kenyans need to realize that's how much power that you have. And once that petition is debated on the floor of the House, it's actually sent to the relevant committee, who then have to call the relevant executive agency to do with that issue, and that an action must come out and be filed within Parliament. So, that brings me to the end of my paper, which I have shared with you, and you can have a copy of it and read it. And also just to further appreciate that, we need to really understand the politics around us. We are going into an election year next year, and we should not be left behind as professionals. We can give guidance to the country so that we get our country that goes in the direction that we want it to go. We should not just leave it, to a select few to determine our futures and to determine where we want to go as a nation. And I really try to encourage politicians, let's not shy away from politics. Sincerely speaking, if we continue shying away from politics, as you can see, the impact it has is direct on you. It's direct on you as a professional. You will not be able to practice very well if the political environment is not favorable for your business and for your livelihoods and, for our future and, our children. So let us participate more. Let us strengthen our associations. Let us use our associations to lobby. Let's use our associations to lobby. Let us get the right members of Parliament who will serve our interests within Parliament. Let us get the right governments in place. Let us understand and let us influence our citizenry in making some of these decisions. And let's do it without fear, because we are blessed in the sense that we are professionals. So a lot has been given to us, and we need to give it back to the community by giving the correct guidelines when it comes to the choice of our political leadership. The late President Moi used to say, "Siasa mbaya, maisha mbaya." And as you can see, even from the paper I've presented, it touches on your everyday life. So let us be alive to that fact. And let me thank you once more for giving me this opportunity to address you. I would have absolutely loved to come and spend time with you, have lunch and mingle. But another time is going to come. So I'll say to you, God bless you. God bless you as you wind up on your annual summit. Let's get some good resolutions out of the annual summit that then can help build our nation. God bless you all, and thank you very much.